Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bunch of Nuts podcast. Today, we're recording this on Wednesday, Juneteenth. It's currently Michael Jordan Day, 73 days away till kickoff. Tomorrow will be 72, and I don't even remember who we picked for 72, Cass.
Our boy Jamie Sumner.
Oh my, how could I forget? How well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
almost ruined the surprise, but yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, big day tomorrow, 72. So everyone will be listening to this by then. But today, most importantly, we're ranking the most important games of 2024. This was your idea. I really like this idea. Um,
I
I had today off. Hopefully, other people had today off. I actually sat down and went through the entire college football schedule, and this was tough. Like
yeah, it was.
I don't know how you did this. Like I just went week to week and I just started listing all the games I thought were important that week. And then I started kind of chopping it down and I started week 1 and then from there I'd be like, okay, week 2, is this game more important? Yes, this goes up above it. And then I got a list of probably I think 14 games. So I'm gonna have a couple honorable mentions. But I have a strong
I
top
think I have 13, but 3 of
13.
them are honorable mentions. But
Yeah.
I think next week, since we'll be away from um a week away from 4th of July, and there's not much to talk about, obviously, unless like Jordan Davidson or David Sanders is like automatically commit to Ohio State. I think
Looking good, looking good.
yeah, I think we should open up and kind of steal this from a lot of podcasts, but we've never done it. A mailbag question
Mm.
where our Twitter followers, all almost 5,000 of you, submit some questions, and they don't have to necessarily be about Ohio State football or Ohio State basketball, but like mailbag questions. Don't get too personal, but I think it'd be fun.
I like it. I think we definitely need to do a mailbag show one time. I mean, this is my favorite time to talk about college football.
Yeah.
It's the summer. For some reason, I get more excited around this time to talk about because we're so close but so far away.
I get excited because my baseball team's in last place. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's tough to be a Reds fan, but um enough of that. Let's get into it. I mean, I'll start with some honorable mentions.
yeah, I'll go with honorable mentions too.
I'll just throw out all my honorable mentions. I got Notre Dame versus Florida State, week 12. I think that will be big. I mean, I don't know what Florida State's going to be this year. It could be kind of rebuilding. Notre Dame, they're also kind of in that weird. They could be good, but I'm not sure. I'm not saying it's going to be the most important game yet. Then I got Penn State versus USC, week 7. I think that one of those two teams is going to have a shot at making the playoff. Um, week
Week
2,
week
I found
week
this is an interesting one. NC State versus Tennessee. I think though that's like the Duke Mayo kickoff. Uh, but those are two kind of sleeper teams, I feel. And that could really, set their the winner of that game could definitely set their season on a good trajectory. Um, sorry, I have two more casts.
Sure fine.
At Tulane versus Oklahoma. I think that's a big one because Tulane's probably the best group of 5 team to potentially make a run at the playoff. And that would be a marquee win for them. Also kind of gauge how tough Oklahoma is because hint hint, Oklahoma's gonna be on this my list further down for some other ones. And then my last one, I put Bama versus Wisconsin. It just looks good on paper. And it's really you're kind of gauging the SEC versus the Big Ten. I still like Bama in that though. I think Bama will win big, but um, those are my honorable mentions.
Um, my honorable mention is week 1, LSU versus USC. It's kind of a sneaky game. Uh, I expect I expect I expect a lot of points to be scored in that game. Other honorable mention is Florida State and Miami. Right now I have Florida State winning the ACC, but Miami is also one of my sleeper teams in the ACC that could really sneak up, and that's a huge game. And then week 8, that's week 7, and then my other honorable mention is Mizzou and Alabama, week 8. Um, I like Mizzou. I just don't think they might squeak into the playoffs, but they've got a tough road ahead of them as well. One game I did not put on here, and I just thought of it, was Oregon and Boise State. 'Cause I think Boise State is one of those tough group of 5 teams that I don't think like it's important for Boise State, but not really for Oregon. Because Oregon right now is getting a lot of hype, and I have Oregon in my top 10. I think 2 or 3 times. I have to look really once we get through it.
I mean, I also didn't want to just throw in the same team like 10 times. Uh, I like, I could
But
have
it's
easily,
really hard not to either,
I know,
because
like the Oregon one definitely, like they definitely could have been in a couple times. So I get that. I tried to be fair and try to include, um, every conference and really try to think big picture here. What like truly are the marquee games? Because like obviously like I feel like Colorado, Nebraska.
yeah, that was my other one. I had them in my original top 10, but that was my other honorable mention,
Like
and I
that's a game
forgot to
that's
write
gonna
that
feel
down.
so important in September, but like in the grand scheme of things, it
Yeah,
doesn't mean
that's
anything.
why like I had it in my top 10 at the begin with, and then I had it in my honorable mention, and somehow I took it off my honorable mention. But yeah, I mean, I'm ready to dive into 10 through 1.
Let's do. I'll let you kick it off since I started with the honorable mention.
A lot of people may not like it just depends how the one team is. And I don't think they're going to win this game, but it is a rivalry. I'm going Oklahoma and Texas, the Red River rivalry, week 5, as number 10 for most important, because you're going to see I have Texas in here quite a bit, like a couple few times. Texas right now on paper looks the part to win the SEC. However, they do play Oklahoma, they do play Georgia, they play Michigan. So they have 3 losses. They could potentially have 3 losses on their schedule, still being one of the most talented teams in the SEC. Is just that's the Steve Sarkisian way. So not putting this game as an importancy would be laughable for me. So I put it at number 10, but as Texas fans may disagree, it's not the most important game on their schedule.
I like it. I got at number 10. I got, and this is like I guess this is what we're gonna call the SEC West um dark horse matchup. I got LSU versus Ole Miss, and that is in week 7. So that'll be kind of midpoint of the season for both these teams. They're entering conference play. Really getting into it, and they're both projected for 9.5 wins. That's the over under. So the winner of this, that's the team that like is probably going to have a good chance to make the playoff from the SEC, because the SEC is going to get 4 or 5 schools in probably. I feel like that's almost like a de facto playoff game. It
Yeah.
feels like, and it's the past 2 years. It's been Ole Miss won in 2023, LSU won in 2022, and I believe Ole Miss won in 2022. So this kind of flips. And they're both good programs right now. Like I love what Brian Kelly's doing. I really like Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin. But that game between those two teams, that's a make or break game. I feel like for both those programs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you with that one, because LSU is a team that could very well go 8-5,
Yeah,
or 7-5 and 8-4. Thing with LSU is will they score as many points as they give up? That's the thing. I've never thought in my wildest dreams 10 years ago that LSU would be giving up the amount of points that they do, um, as they do. I mean, the offenses that they play, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but just the two that we mentioned, USC and Ole Miss, can average 40 points a game. That's what's wild about this because LSU can also put 40 points a game. But the
So
key is who's their quarterback?
it's going to be Garrett Nussmeier most likely. For LSU, yeah, they play. So real quick, not we're not an LSU podcast, but prior to that game, they'll play USC, Nichols, South Carolina, UCLA, South Alabama. So I mean, there's a good chance they could be undefeated going into that game if they take care of USC. The USC is the big if there. So that's why I think that's a
How
big
about
game.
LSU playing Big Ten schools like UCLA and USC? That's wild.
I love it.
I do
But
too.
I mean, LSU like outside that game, they LSU because they have USC, they have Bama, they have Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Those are the four tough games. They realistically, if LSU splits those and goes 10-2, they're in the playoff. They're going to be in the playoff. So and the same thing goes for Ole Miss. If they go 10-2, Ole Miss, you don't have to win your conference anymore to be a top 4 team. You just got to be a top 12 team.
Yeah. My number 9 is between two playoff teams. This is a rivalry. This is a rivalry that doesn't have a trophy or a name. It's Alabama Georgia week 5. However, it is number 9. You people are like, "Well, why is it number 9?" It's because both of them are probably going to make the playoffs. And it's all about what seed are they going to be, and that's why I have it number 9 as important seed because the loser of this game is still going to make the playoffs. It's just where they are they going to be traveling or will they be hosting? That's where I'm at with this because I think I like I said I'm going to sit here and flat out say, and this may change in July. I have Texas winning the SEC, and Georgia and Alabama are 2 and 3. That's the way I look at it. It's this game just basically is seeding for me, but both teams are making the playoffs in my eyes.
I like that logic now that you kind of like talked about it and like why you put it there. That makes sense. Um, for my number 9, I do have Georgia in there. I do have a different team. I put Clemson in week 1. It just feels important because it feels important because it's like that early game. I feel like it's the big game of the week 1. We're going to be really into that, no doubt. It feels big. I just don't know if it's up as high. I have it at 9. I can't put it much higher just because I don't know what Clemson's going to be.
I have
I
it really
also,
high.
yeah, I don't think like I like Clemson. Well, I don't like Clemson. I don't think they'll be terrible. But this is kind of also a big game just because it's like, hey, this could be kind of like the beginning of the end for Clemson if they don't
Yeah.
if they don't win this and they come out flat and Georgia, beats them like 49-0. That's pretty important in my book. Like I feel like that's something that might be overlooked. It could be the beginning and the end for Clemson. So um that's why I have it at 9. I don't know.
I have at 8 a potential tiebreaker game. I have Oregon versus Michigan. Let's say Oregon drops to Ohio State, loses Ohio State. Their schedule sets up that this Michigan game could be a tiebreaker in reality. Because knowing, hey, if Michigan does lose to Oregon, then they would have to beat Ohio State um, potentially in the Big Ten standings. I'm not talking because they could already have a loss or, you know, but maybe not a loss in the Big Ten if that makes sense. Um, it's a tiebreaker game to me potentially because if Oregon does lose to Ohio State and loses to Michigan, they're out of the Big Ten title race, but they could potentially end up getting into the playoffs, but have to go on the road. So this is an important game for both teams. Could be higher. I could have had it higher, but There's also some other games that are up in there that I think are a little bit bigger, but also Michigan's an unknown. Like, who knows? You look at this game, you're like, oh wow, you had this game. Michigan could be a dud. You don't know. But it's just like the Alabama or Georgia game. It could be against. It's all about seeding and a tiebreaker game. Like, that's just where I'm at with it.
I have, for me, I got at 8. I got week 5, the Red River rivalry. That's always an important game. I feel like, like there's no reason why that shouldn't be a top 10 game a year. I think we all understand the implications of that one. Um, it's more important, I think, for Texas because Oklahoma people aren't really expecting a lot from this year. That's fine. They kind of have a gauntlet. But Texas, that's their big. It's Georgia, Michigan, and Oklahoma for Texas. Those are their big games. So, um, I feel like that's kind of like a must win for Texas because they're probably going to lose to Georgia, and then who knows what happens with Michigan. In a perfect world, Texas curb stomps them, but I don't know. But they like Texas, like they could go to if they lose all 3 of those, they're probably not in the playoff. I don't like if they go 9-3, that's a massive failure for that team, and they're not a playoff team. Then I don't think. So that's why like I feel like the Oklahoma one is such a big game because if they win that, they're going to go 10-2 then, worst case.
Yeah. My so real quick, I know it's a gauntlet. I think this game, I had it at number 10. I think it's more important for Oklahoma than Texas because if Oklahoma loses and they lose other games, I think Brent Venables is gone. I, I, I don't think the Oklahoma boosters and heck, Oklahoma needs to start winning because we got to get big game Boomer off Ohio State's jock right now because every big game that Ohio State plays, he he predicts that team to win the national championship. Big game Boomer picked Oregon to win the national championship. We got to get Oklahoma him back to rooting for Oklahoma. Like that team has to get better. I think
Oklahoma, come get your man. Like,
yes, please.
okay, it's funny now. Um, Makes sense to me. Cass,
Mine, yeah.
you're at 7.
So my number 7 is one of your honorable mentions, and hear me out. It's not must necessarily important for Florida State. It is important for Notre Dame. Notre Dame opens with Texas A&M at Texas A&M, who I think is going to be a better team than last year. They play at it's a 3:30 game, so never mind. They play at Ross-Ade Stadium against Notre Dame, against Purdue. Purdue is always tough at Ross-Ade, but I wish it was a night game. That's week 3. They play home against Louisville. Louisville is a tough. Has a good defense. They
Louisville,
also,
sneaky. Louisville will be
yeah,
sneaky.
and Notre Dame is bound and determined to lose one of those games. You know, after they lost to Ohio State a couple years ago, they end up losing to Marshall. So this is a game that's really important for Notre Dame because say if they drop to Texas A&M or somehow gets upset by Purdue or Louisville, they have to beat Florida State. They have to, and they have to beat USC at the end of the year to keep their playoff hopes alive. Because think about it, regardless if they go undefeated, they're not getting a first round bye. So it's really, in reality, they have to win as many games as they can to prevent themselves from not hosting a playoff game. So this game is really important for Notre Dame.
I don't hate your logic. I got number 7. For me, week 9, it's Missouri versus Bama. I think that was your honorable mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got Missouri versus Bama. I just think that one, the winner of that one is going to be the second. Well, they'll be the third best team out of the SEC. SEC might literally get 5 teams in the play. I'm thinking they could get Georgia, Bama, like Missouri, Texas, and maybe like an LSU or Ole Miss. I think like that's very possible they could get 5 teams in somehow. Um, so I think that one's a massive one just because it's the old guard versus kind of the new guard, which is kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But people are saying Luther Burden, like number one receiver in college, but I think that's insane to say. I don't think he is the number one receiver, but like it just feels like a monster matchup, and it's an intriguing one because it's like is Missouri about to take the next step? Like if they are, that would be the game, and then it would also kind of be like changing of the guard in the SEC potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's a massive one, and it's really under. I know you. I think you had an honorable mention.
Yeah. The
But
thing that concerns me with Missouri is every time they have a really solid year, and this is in their history, they always come back with a dud. Like they even had uh who was that longtime Bears backup quarterback that played? Chase Daniel and Jeremy Maclin, and they were really good. And then the next year they weren't very good. That's what worries me about Missouri. But I
Well,
think they
it could be different though because they like their coach now. They have like their coaches has been established. He's been there years at this point. I feel like it might be a little different because
it
they
could
still
be.
they still have they still have the same guys under center. They have the talent returning. Like really, all they lost it feels like was their corner, um, and their running back. Eh, I don't know. I I don't hate Missouri this year.
Yeah. I don't either. Number 6, I have Oregon and Ohio State. I think winner, loser of this game, we'll get a rematch in Indy, if that makes sense. I know I had that logic a few minutes ago about Oregon, Michigan, but winner, loser of this game will be a rematch in Indy for the Big Ten title. However, I still have Ohio State going undefeated. I'm a Buckeye fan. I have them undefeated. I just think number 6 on the Richter scale because there's other games on Ohio State's schedule that's more important than this. Um, but I think Oregon, Ohio State is my number 6 because ultimately it could potentially be a rematch in the Big Ten championship game.
My number 6, I got USC LS versus LSU week 1. And the reason I have it up here is because like one, both are fringe playoff teams, LSU, USC. So this is like a kind of a de facto playoff game. It's really like a tiebreaker, it feels like. And also because I feel like both those teams are gonna be vying for like the 10th, 11th.
I was about to say that. I was about to say
Uh,
that.
it's week 1, so it's gonna feel super important. I think it's like the Monday game. It feels like so we're all gonna be watching. Everyone's gonna be watching that one. Um, but also it's Big Ten versus SEC, and it's week 1, and like that's just such a big matchup because when it comes to evaluating the conferences and saying, oh, who's better and stuff that year, like that, people are going to point to that game and that matchup as a data point.
Yep.
So I feel like that's why I have it at
And
6.
and with that game too, it's like, oh, okay. Like the winner of this game gets it gets the 10th seed. The loser of this game gets the 11th seed. Who's traveling to Oregon and who's traveling to Notre Dame or something like that. Like it could
But
be,
it honestly might be the winner gets the 10 or 11 seed, and the
yeah,
loser just
is out. Yeah.
out. It feels more like that almost.
Yeah. And
Kind
and
of
you
feels
know,
like
and think about it too, with both of those teams schedule, no
so
margin for error.
it feels like in 2017 when like Ohio State hosted Oklahoma. Uh, that turned out to be basically a de facto playoff game because if Ohio State wins that, they have one loss, they go to the playoff, and you flip the records. Like Oklahoma has an extra loss, so those are important. Like people don't even, I feel like people don't even realize
uh,
it. But
I'm
like,
kind of it makes you think, oh, thank God we lost because we probably would have got curb stomped by oh no, that was Georgia. That was the Georgia Ohio that was the Georgia Oklahoma Rose Bowl. I remember that.
yeah,
I remember that. Number 5, I have Ohio State Penn State because here's the deal, buddy. If Ohio State loses to Oregon, They have to beat Penn State because honestly, outside of USC, this is Penn State's Super Bowl, and I think it's huge for Penn State and it's huge for Ohio State, um, especially if Ohio State winds up losing to Oregon. But it's James Franklin, man.
I I,
It's James Franklin.
I didn't even put this on honorable mention just because I'm so sick of, and like we're not even gonna be locked into playing Penn State anymore. It feels like with the new conference and stuff. I just took it off completely. Not even honorable mention. I'm just sick and tired of this game always being hyped up every year, and it has been good, for most of the years, but like I feel like the last couple of years it's kind of been lackluster. And I think regardless, Penn State's going to go 10-2. It doesn't even matter if they beat Ohio State in this. Like Ohio State, like will probably beat them, and Penn State will still go 10-2, and they will probably still make the playoff. So it's like I
J
feel like it doesn't matter.
JTT just hates playing Penn State for some reason, and but it is important because if you look at it, if Penn State is who people think they are, they could be undefeated when we've come to Happy Valley. Thank God it's going to be a big noon stripe out game where Will Howard and Quinshawn Junkins, Travion Henderson will just run the rock.
I like
So
it.
that was number 5.
At number 5 for me, I got Clemson versus Florida State. This isn't saying either team's going to be a powerhouse. I'm just saying someone has to literally win the ACC. So uh,
Wasn't this game on at your house during the Ohio State Notre Dame game?
it might have been.
And I think Florida State won with a field goal or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So this is week 6. And this is just someone literally has to win the ACC. That's going to be a playoff bid. That the winner of that should be in the driver's seat with maybe like Miami or Louisville lurking. But
Yeah.
that's the biggest game in the ACC every year, it feels like. So that's why I have it at 5.
Number 4, I have Georgia and Texas. Again, I think it's a rematch in the SEC title game. What I think is important about it, can Texas, it's again, I think it's more important for Texas just because they're coming from the Big 12. Um, they've got a tough schedule already. And I think, they'll be 2 weeks removed from playing Oklahoma. And I think playing Georgia can solidify, hey, we are an SEC school now. This could put a stamp, say, hey, we're part of this conference now. We have a shot. Ultimately, I think the loser of this game will win the SEC title game.
I like it. I got number 4. I got Texas versus Michigan week 2. This
We'll discuss this because that's my number 3.
Okay.
So
It just this feels like one of the biggest early games of the entire season. I don't think I really got to go into the reasons why. And I think it's just so obvious this should be a top 5 game. It's just literally defending national champs versus a playoff team last year. What more could you want?
it's in the big house on Big Noon Kickoff. Gus
Versus
Johnson.
yeah, early like it's
Yeah.
say no less.
It's SEC versus Big Ten again. And it's, if you look at it, Texas, Michigan, Texas again trying to prove their dominance. Like they actually wanted a shot at Michigan last year. They didn't get it because they lost to Washington. This is their chance, and I think this game is important because it is week 2. The loser of this game has got to fight because they both have tough schedules. We've already talked about these two teams a few times. This is no margin for error for both teams. Like they really have to. The loser of this game has really got to buckle up their chin straps and go. Like they have to go and play for that spot and be the teams that they're capable of. I hope Quinn Ewers goes up there and beats them. I really do. But it's a very important game for both teams.
If Quinn Ewers goes into the big house and beats Michigan, I will forgive him leaving Ohio State. Like we're
I
good.
won't. I
I,
won't yet.
I will. I will. If he goes and if he, hands him a fat L, he can even plant the flag like Baker if he wants. I got no problem with it. We're good, buddy. Like,
I will forgive him. I will forgive him once they are out of the national title picture.
fair enough.
That was my number 3. So go ahead.
My number 3, I got just a monster matchup. And I know your logic is they're both going to be playoff teams. I just think it's important just because of recruiting. I got Georgia, Alabama. I believe was it week 5? Yeah,
Week
week
5, something like that.
5. Just from a recruiting aspect, it's just literally Kirby or Kalen could turn around and be like, "Oh well, we beat them, so like most recently, so you should come here." And it's the two big SEC powerhouses. They don't always play each other in the regular season, so that has to be a top 3 game for me, absolutely. And they both should be playoff teams too. So I think that's gonna be a good one.
At number 2, I have Georgia Clemson at week 1. I think biggest game of the week. I think will be the most exciting game. Probably not. I think LSU USC will be. But it's really important for Clemson because if they knock off Georgia, then Dabo can be like, we're back. Like, feel like my program's back. We're not going under like everybody thinks we are. But if Georgia goes in and curb stomps them, then Clemson's basically, well, we're screwed. Like, like we have to win the ACC, which I don't think they will. But I think importancy for Georgia to get off on the right foot, Carson Beck, get the power to the pedal to the metal, and it's important for Clemson because if they knock off Georgia, they can reassert themselves in the college football landscape.
Those are great points. So now we gotta go number 2 and number 1. We are running out of time. Number 2, I got Ohio State versus Oregon, week 7. For me, this feels like the two heavyweight contenders really filling each other out. I don't have a number 1 because I think we're gonna get another rematch of this. But just looking at like all the lines, it's -1 odds right now for the Buckeyes. It's just
Which
feels like this is the big one.
which means if it was a neutral site, Ohio State would be favored.
Yeah, cash.
Uh Number 1 is Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah.
I already did number 2, so yeah,
Okay. That-
there's there's no other important game. Ohio State, Michigan.
I also put that as my number 1, and the reason is Ohio State could lose to Oregon, but they won't be able to lose to Michigan in that circumstance. I
Yep.
think, and also Ryan Day cannot afford that.
Nope.
And the fan base cannot afford that. Ryan Day cannot afford that. This team cannot go into the playoff limping. And it's, the rivalry, the hatred, all that. We all know that. It always feels like this is always a top 3 most important game, but it feels like it's good. It's the most important game. And this is going under the impression that Michigan should be competitive this year. I think the defense will be pretty good. Offense, who knows? But
But if you look at it, if Michigan loses to Texas, if they lose to Oregon, they lose to Washington, or USC, who they could very well lose to all of them, and then go into week 14. It's definitely still a must win for Ryan Day and Ohio State because
they would love nothing more.
exactly because especially if Ohio State somehow loses to Penn State and loses loses one at the other, Penn State or Oregon. And right there, Penn State with one loss, sitting with one loss, could be like, go Wolverines. You know what I mean? Like it could be one of those things.
No, that totally makes sense. Well, like I said, we don't know what they're going to get at quarterback. And I will say it might be an upgrade at this point. If anyone saw the JJ McCarthy first pitch, you can't tell me he can't throw. Like it is crazy. That guy cannot throw. And look, I know I threw like 50 miles an hour at the Clippers game on Friday, but I also have a bad shoulder and a bad elbow and I'm almost 30 and I'm a dad and I can throw a football much better than a baseball. So
I could probably
I,
throw a
I can throw a
football.
baseball accurately though. No problem getting it. It won't be fast, but I can get it down home plate.
I bet I could throw a first pitch better than JJ McCarthy.
100%. I think a lot of people could. It's crazy.
Crazy. Again, next week, not
Mailbag.
sure what, not sure when Dan's gonna post it on Twitter for next week. For mailbag questions. Maybe he'll post it this weekend. But I think it's gonna be a fun one because that'll give us a chance. We'll do it and maybe have your submissions in by Tuesday because likelihood of us recording on Wednesday or Thursday are very high. So
Preferably Wednesday because I got some traveling to do next week.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's all I got. So I'll post a mailbag. Please, send any question in. We're curious. But thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Butch Nuts podcast. Stay cool this week. It's so hot. I don't know how the SEC does it. But you know what? It's only going to make us stronger. Go Bucks.
go Bucks.